Hello, darling. Buyer beware is a saying as old as time, but sometimes seller beware is advice of equal value. And let's leave it at that for now. I hope you enjoy tonight's story. Miss Pierce will see you now. The man who called himself Donovan Drexel sat in a dark booth at a swanky supper club, nursing his drink slowly in order to keep his expenses low and hoping his companion didn't notice. Across from him sat a woman who called herself Evans Emanuel. Like Donovan, she'd come to Hollywood in the 1930s with hopes of movie stardom. She'd snagged a few bit parts on account of her good looks, but they never amounted to much, also like Donovan. But then she tried work as a casting director, where she had greater success, before finding her true calling and passion, as a procurer, a madam, a pimp, to the rich and famous. Evans was always looking for the next stud to add to her stable, and in Donovan she thought she'd struck gold. He was 6'2" with eyes of blue, what looked to be a great physique, confidence and charm for days, and a voice like dark velvet. When Evans complimented his voice, Donovan was momentarily tempted to share a bit of his own backstory, how, when he'd come to Hollywood, he'd had a voice like a chipmunk, but his agent told him, "Go into the hills and scream until you can't make any more sound or start coughing up blood." Donovan did it and was mute for a week, but when his voice returned, it was deep and smoky, the voice he'd always wanted. And while it hadn't gotten him any big film roles, it had certainly helped him in his later line of work. But Evans kept on chattering away, and the moment to share the anecdote passed. "I need you to understand," Evans said. She was an attractive woman, Donovan thought, but with an obvious nose job, an obvious dye job, and an obviously fake transatlantic accent. "This client of mine is very special and very particular. She won't receive just anyone, and confidentiality, discretion, is of the utmost importance." Donovan smiled. His teeth were perfect, as were his dimples, his laugh lines, and everything else about his handsome face. "Of course," he said, "that goes with the territory." "Yes," Evans said, "but there's discretion and then there's discretion. Not all jobs are created equal. I really think she would like you, which could be an exceptionally lucrative arrangement for you. But there can never be even a whisper of a suggestion that the two of you have met. Not your best friend, not your mother, not your shrink. Nobody can know about this." Donovan leaned back in his chair. He was all square angles in his expensive suit, the only nice thing he owned. Did this woman think it was his first rodeo? Hadn't she come to him for his reputation as much as his looks? "So what's the story here?" he asked. "Married? Or maybe a movie star with a wholesome image?" Evans chuckled darkly. "Obviously, I'm not about to divulge my client's identity," she said. "Not married, no. Not an especially goody-goody image. But a public figure, yes. And a person who doesn't want to be seen as someone who hires gigolos. No offense." "None taken," Donovan said, holding up his hands. "Sorry to make such a fine point of it," Evans said. "I'm a little protective of this one, and not just because I've made a fortune off of her." Finally, she grinned and handed Donovan a card. "All right," she said. "You've passed my test. but you'll need to pass the final inspection, a body inspection. Inspection? Donovan said with a smile, the card in his hand. You're serious? You mean like medical? Serious as a heart attack, Evans said. You'll be gone over with a fine-tooth comb. They'll take your measurements, all of them, and provide you with the type of suit she likes her dates to wear. It's a whole production for this one, but it won't cost you a thing. It's at her insistence, so she pays. None of it comes out of your check. Donovan looked down at the card. It was just a printed address with the day and time scribbled on the back in blue ink. Huh, he said, his eyebrows raised. Well, at least I get a free suit outfit. Evans pushed another card across the table, folded over to hide what was written inside. If it starts to feel strange, she said, looking at him coyly, then just think about the money. Donovan lifted the second card and read the amount written inside. His eyes bulged in shock, his mouth open. He looked at her. That won't be a problem, he said. It was more than he'd made in the past year. He showed up at the address at the appointed time. The location was just outside of downtown proper, a brick building on a back street that looked like it had once been a factory. A garage-style door, chained up with a padlock, faced the street. There were large windows, but too high up to see in. But around the back was an alley, with a white rectangle outlined on the ground, within which were the words "Customer Parking," neatly printed in block letters. Donovan parked his Studebaker there, and almost immediately a middle-aged man in a black suit stepped into the alley via a back door of the building. His appearance was immaculate, his fair skin flawless, his steely hair and thin gray mustache groomed to perfection. "Mr. Donovan Drexel," he said, and he had a hint of an English accent, as if maybe he spent his summer holidays there. He looked Donovan up and down as he asked. Donovan smiled and tipped his hat to the man. "In the flesh," he said. "I guess this is the place, then." The man in the black suit gave Donovan an appraising look, rubbing his thumb and forefinger together. "Indeed," he said. "Please, come inside." Donovan expected to step into a warehouse, but it was more like the fitting room of an upscale department store. Expensive, fashionable suits in a variety of fabrics and colors were lined up on hangers. Mannequins wore more casual clothes. There was underwear, swimwear, socks, shoes, hats, sunglasses, watches, all manner of things, as well as full-length mirrors facing every conceivable angle. There was no natural sunlight within. It was all artificial, bright yet diffused, casting minimal shadows. It was almost like stage lighting, designed to flatter the subject as he viewed himself in the glass. Yet it would also hide nothing from the man in the dark suit, who produced his tape measure as he said, "This row, please, sir." Any shyness Donovan had ever had about nudity had been worked out long ago, through his years as a print model, then an actor, and then finally through selling his body. Yet it was undeniably strange to have this fussy little man give him an order in a room of bright lights and mirrors. Still, Donovan complied. He remembered the wise words that Evans had left with him. Think of the money. And so he did. He lost himself in those happy thoughts as the man took exhaustive measurements, muttering to himself as he did so. This was so much more than neck and waist and inseam. Everything was measured, down to the size of Donovan's hands and the lengths of his fingers. Whoever this client was, Donovan thought, they were abnormally obsessed with parts, when most were more concerned with the impression of the whole. Yet even Donovan did a double take when the man said, "Now, sir, if you could work yourself into a state of arousal, I must measure your manhood as well." "You're joking," Donovan said. But the man in the dark suit just stared at him, not smiling, one thin eyebrow slightly raised, tape measure in hand. So, despite his surprise, Donovan did his best to comply, and here again the fussy man made no comment other than a slight as he took the measurements in question, noting them along with the others in the small notebook he carried. After this bizarre ritual, Donovan was encouraged to put on a clean t-shirt and some light linen trousers. He was then brought into an adjoining room which had the appearance of a barber shop, and where another rather effete man awaited him. This man did not speak, instead simply ushering Donovan into the barber's chair. There was no discussion about what sort of haircut Donovan might want, and Donovan had the distinct impression any such decisions had already been made for him. The cut he was given wasn't anything he would have thought to request, yet he had to admit that it was flattering. It was vaguely triangular, extending his square-jawed silhouette upward and complementing the many planes and angles of his face. He was also given the cleanest, closest shave of his life. With this completed, Donovan was brought back into the dressing room where, though little time had passed, several tailored suits and pieces of casual wear were already waiting for him to try on. The silver-haired man with the mustache directed him as to which items to wear, and Donovan was then photographed in them, posing as one might for a department store advertisement. This came naturally to Donovan as he'd done it before, and while he tended to feel confident in his appearance, he felt doubly so after the making-over he'd just received. As before, the silver-haired man offered no opinion as he snapped the photos, giving no more response than the occasional The photo session ended with Donovan in the buff, the subject of flagrant beefcake shots. He'd expected this, yet even with his healthy ego, he found it a bit much, and more than a little embarrassing. Still, again, he soothed himself with "think about the money," which he did, and before he knew it, it was over. He was directed to change back into his own clothing and left alone for a time. Eventually, not knowing what else to do, he wandered a bit between the various rooms. He was surprised to find that there were multiple dressing rooms, multiple salon rooms, multiple photography rooms, all precisely alike. But this made sense, as a single set of rooms wouldn't have been enough to fill the building. It gave the impression of an almost assembly line approach, rapidly processing as many men as possible, and something in that chilled him. Donovan made his way back toward the entrance, and in the final dressing room, where he had initially been measured, he came across another man dressed similarly to himself, with similar features to himself, except blonde instead of dark. The two men could have almost been brothers, and Donovan could tell by the look on the other man's face that he was having the same thought and was just as surprised. Donovan extended his hand and said, "I take it we both just underwent the same odd experience." "I take it so," said the blonde man. "My agent got me this audition. He told me what to expect, but still." So the man's agent was a he, not Evans Emmanuel then. How many people knew about this operation? "Mine too," said Donovan. Taking a step closer, he whispered, "You wouldn't have any idea who's behind this whole thing, would you? I keep imagining who would go through all this trouble and expense just for, well, you know." The blonde man grinned. "She's got to be the most particular fucking person on earth," he said. He shook his head, then added, "I don't know, for sure. But I have a friend who says he went through this same rigmarole about 5 years ago, and he believed the prize at the end was Parnell Pierce." Donovan took a half-step back, his eyes wide open now. "Parnell Pierce," he repeated. Of course, he knew the name. She'd been a major movie star of the 1930s, despite only making 5 pictures. She'd been young then, so she was probably only around 35 or 40 now, could still be very beautiful. Donovan remembered how she looked in Dance of Salome, in a black wig down to her knees, dripping in jewels, and not much else. And then in Das Rheingold, she played almost the precise opposite character, a Viking shield maiden who'd managed to make a horned helmet and a breastplate look like lingerie. But she dropped out of Hollywood around the time the war came. I remember hearing she was in some sort of car accident, the blonde man said. That was when she quit acting. Was she disfigured? Donovan asked. He knew that Parnell Pierce had become a recluse, but he'd never heard this detail in the popular press. Well, it can't be that, the man said. She still sends out signed publicity photos to her fans. Recent ones. You can tell that she's getting older, but she's still gorgeous. And what a body. I'd heard talk she might be paralyzed, though. Donovan said, but it can't be that either if she's in the market for... Donovan didn't feel the need to finish the sentence. But this was interesting, he thought. Still a beautiful woman, still remembered by her fans, yet hiding away in her mansion in the Hollywood Hills, never seen in public. Or maybe she was seen, maybe all the time, but incognito and no one realized. The money was already enough reason to pursue this, but now he could add intrigue to the list as well. I take it your friend never reached that finish line, Donovan said. The blonde man shook his head. Nope, maybe would have done, but he got all patriotic and joined the Navy instead, dropped out of the running. The two men heard someone approaching then, and the blonde said, speaking of which, good luck to you. The man with the silver hair and the pencil mustache entered, and looked surprised to see the two men together and chatting. His mouth settled into a frown. To the blonde man he handed a large bag, similar to one from an upscale department store. Your complimentary suit, the man said, with a slight bow of his head. Our people shall be in touch with your agent. He then gestured toward the door. The blonde man grinned wryly and left. The fussy man then produced a second bag for Donovan. He handed the bag over, but to Donovan he said, You have been selected, sir. And he handed Donovan a card, similar to the one he'd received before, with an address, date, and time. Please report here for your final instructions. Be sure to wear the suit in your bag. Good day. And with that, he left, retreating deeper into the odd studio. And so, Donovan left as well. He rang Evans as soon as he got home. She was surprised but not unhappy to hear from him. A little bird told me that your client is Miss Parnell Pierce herself, he said. Is it true? Her moment of surprised silence was all the confirmation he needed. Who told you that? She asked. Donovan chuckled. I ran into another John at their little beauty parlor, he said. Interesting place, by the way. Interesting people, too. I can't imagine what it costs to run something like that. Furnish it like that, fill it with beautiful clothes, staff it with a bunch of silent phantoms who provide world-class service, and just so this person can get their kicks? Yes, Evans said. It's definitely a unique situation. But is it Parnell Pierce? He asked again. A long silence, then, finally, Evans said, Yes, but you didn't hear that from me. Well, I actually didn't hear it from you, Donovan reminded her. He laughed. What a score this was. An eccentric Hollywood recluse whose only interaction with the world, as far as anyone knew, was through autographed photos. She was unlikely to become an issue for him later, when time and age demanded he move on to some other career. And, thinking of the money again as he was trained to do, he said, Well, apparently she really likes me. I was told before I'd left that I'd been selected. And he thought if we could make this an ongoing arrangement, I'll be a wealthy man by the time I'm done. I know, Evans said flatly. I knew she would pick you. Just do whatever it says on the card they gave you. Show up looking the way you looked when you left their parlor today. If you can do it, then the stars will all line up for you." "What do you mean, if I can do it?" he asked. But Evans only said, "I'm tired, Donovan. I know it's early, but I'm tired. Goodbye." The strangeness of it all nagged at Donovan, but he kept following the advice Evans had given him. He thought about the money, the lifestyle it could bring him, the security. It seemed he had already impressed this client before even meeting her. If he could keep that up, he wouldn't need another client ever again, and the thought was exhilarating. He spent the next 2 days exercising, drinking a lot of water, taking care of his skin. He needed to be at his best. He needed to be perfect. And then the evening came. He drove to the address given at the time given, and found himself at the entrance of a sprawling property high in the Hollywood Hills. The gates opened as his Studebaker pulled up in front of them, like the gates of heaven, he thought, accepting him. He was almost never nervous before a job, but on this night he was. The stakes were so high, and the questions were still so many. He'd called some of his connections on the legitimate side of the business, and had managed to see a few of the signed photographs sent to fans from Parnell Pierce in recent years. She'd been laid out on an opulent bed, dressed in a negligee and a semi-sheer robe. These photos were obviously more recent than her movies. She was still stunningly beautiful, with a figure to die for, but even the airbrushing couldn't completely erase the fine lines around her eyes and mouth. Yet there was also a sort of halo around her head, suggesting to Donovan that some photographic trickery had been employed. He just couldn't say exactly what kind. Still, he'd wolf-whistled when he saw the pictures. She was every bit as beautiful as she'd been in her heyday. If this was his client, if this was the woman who had found each and every measurement of his body to her liking, then he could only believe that they would get on exceptionally well. And yet, as his ratty old Studebaker pulled to a stop before the front door of her mansion, he wondered, not for the first time, why such a beautiful woman should become a recluse. If the accident had stolen her beauty, that he could understand, but it hadn't. So what could have been so traumatizing that she would hide away like this? Maybe they would grow close, and he would have a chance to find out. He was met at the front door by the same middle-aged man with the dark suit and the silver pencil-thin mustache who had taken his photograph at the little beauty parlor. "Mr. Drexel," he said, opening the door and giving a slight bow. Donovan found himself in a magnificent rounded atrium. A spiral staircase at the center led upwards to the second and third floors of the mansion. The walls were lined with golden columns, with giant windows between them. Subdued golden lighting poured from recessed sconces. Potted palm trees and ferns abounded. Donovan found himself imagining the sort of parties one could host in such a space. Did Parnell Pierce still throw parties there, attended by other movie stars, or maybe by just the men in her harem? He wondered. The man with the mustache was speaking to him, but Donovan was hardly taking it in. They were climbing the staircase now, and Donovan's heart was pounding. How many men had walked through that salon, yet she'd chosen him. The blonde man Donovan met there had the looks and charm of a matinee idol, yet he'd been dismissed, and she'd chosen Donovan instead. He felt honored, blessed to be selected by this queen, this goddess of this golden Hollywood temple. They climbed to the third floor, where a beautiful glass dome rose above them, the full moon visible beyond. The man with the mustache led Donovan down a hall of golden walls and rose-colored carpets. It was like a dream. They passed several doors and fine works of art, before finally coming to a massive set of double doors set off with columns. The man with the mustache knocked twice. Then, without waiting for a reply, he opened the doors. The space beyond was dark, but not completely dark. Donovan could see a massive bed, several feet off the ground. Rather than a footboard at the end of the bed, there were instead several steps leading up into it. A massive canopy hung over the bed, creating the mood of a royal pavilion as much as a sleeping space. The fabrics were all in shades of gold and rose. Donovan could see a vanity, a writing desk, more potted palms, an ornate chest, an open door leading into a cavernous closet. But all of these details drifted to the back of his mind. His attention was focused on the beautiful woman lying on the bed, wearing nothing but a sheer robe. "Miss Pierce is waiting," said the man with the mustache. "Please approach the steps and disrobe." Donovan shot the man a glance. Did he intend to stay and watch? But Donovan did as he was asked. There were electric wall candelabras around the room, all set to their dimmest setting, emitting only the faintest light. There was also a massive window above the writing desk, with its curtains open and only the shears drawn, allowing moonlight in as well. As such, Donovan could see the woman's legs, the lower half of her torso, and her hands as she shifted on the bed, clearly eager for his company. He felt his own excitement grow as he stripped out of the beautiful suit she had provided for him. He wanted to be just perfect for her. He wanted to earn the outrageous sum he'd been promised, but more than that, he wanted to prove he was worthy of being chosen above all the others, that he could and would satisfy whatever fantasy was behind this for her. Once Donovan was nude, the man with the mustache whispered, "Now go to her." And so he did. He climbed the few steps, cold marble under his bare feet, and lowered himself gently on top of her. He did not move to immediately open her robe. He wanted to show restraint, respect, to give her the opportunity to lead if she wished. Instead, he moved slowly up her body, wanting to come face to face. As he did this, her arms were on him, all over him, adoring his physique and guiding him toward union. But Donovan saw that even in the dark, her face looked strange, and then he realized why. He was looking at a cloth mask upon which was printed the image of Parnell Pierce as she appeared in her signed photos. Gently, he took hold of the cloth and pulled it aside, and then he gasped. There was no face underneath. There was a neck and just a stump of the back of a head, with a small amount of golden hair clinging to it, roughly healed over, from where the rest of the head had been torn from the body in that horrid car accident so long ago. And attached on top of this remnant was a metal cage, roughly the size of a human head, which housed countless wires and tubes, flowing from the neck into the headboard. Fluid seemed to course through most of them, electricity through others, through another air. A dull pink light came on overhead, within the canopy over the bed. It illuminated a recessed space within the headboard, and now Donovan could see that he was at eye level with the separated head of Parnell Pierce. The head rested on a tray. Additional tubes and wires came from the headboard and into the bottom of the head. The face was as beautiful as the body, and it looked at Donovan with unmistakable desire, while the hands of the body continued to pull at him, insisting that he do what he'd come for and bring her the satisfaction she paid for so generously. Oh my God, Donovan thought to himself. He was looking into her eyes, but she was just a head, kept alive by machines, the pumping and huffing and gurgling of which he could hear somewhere behind the wall. Yet they'd done her up with full glamour makeup and hair and this diffused pink lighting. Yes, it was definitely the same face from the autographed photos and from those blockbuster movies that he remembered from years ago. And now Donovan understood that trick photography that he'd detected. The face was real, and the body was real, and both were as beautiful as claim. Putting them back together, though, that was the illusion. Donovan wanted to cry out, to scream, but only a shocked, horrified gurgle emerged. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This couldn't possibly be true. He would have crawled backwards out of the bed, but he heard the cocking of a gun behind him. Then the man with the mustache spoke again. Miss Pierce suffered a grave injury in a car accident some years ago. Had she died, it would have been reported in the papers. But they were able to save her, you see, so it was not. Her handicap, or rather their handicap, is severe, however. The head cannot touch, and the body cannot see. But by bringing them together like this, we can still create for them a pleasurable experience. There's so little for either of them to enjoy now, and Miss Pierce did so much for me. Arranging these encounters is really the least I can do for her. The body had successfully directed Donovan into joining with her and was reacting as one might expect, wrapping her legs around him, stroking his arms and torso as he hovered over her. He was too shocked to move, too horrified, except in the ways in which she guided him to, with surprising surety and power. You see why the vetting process is so severe, the man with the mustache went on. The head cannot speak, it has no lungs. So we base our selections on careful and thorough comparison of new prospects to past partners and attempt to match the most successful pairings as closely as possible. The body was in full control of the experience now, leading Donovan through their encounter with very little input or resistance from him. His eyes were tightly shut. If he opened them and looked down, he would be forced to see the cage of wires and tubes where her head should be. Or if he looked up, he'd see her head, disembodied, watching him from its tray. He couldn't abide either possibility. That's it, the man said quietly. Oh, she likes you a great deal. Yes, a great deal indeed. Maybe we've finally found her perfect match. If so, Mr. Drexel, I have to thank you, as the search has been both exhausting and expensive. Of course, her mate would only need his ideal body. There would be no use at all for the head. When I was a little boy in the 1980s, traveling carnivals and fairs still had freak shows. Unlike the freak shows of the past, however, the attractions generally weren't living people. Rather, they tended to be fake taxidermy, fake skeletons and artifacts, and elaborate illusions. The audience wasn't really expected to believe that any of it was real. The fun was in how much showmanship went into the gags and how creepy and cool they were overall. My favorite of these ever was the headless woman illusion. There'd always be a trailer upon which her tale of woe was told in a comic book style series of images. She was a beautiful starlet of yesteryear who was decapitated in a terrible car accident in the 1950s or 60s. And yet, medical science had managed to keep her body alive all through the years, even without its head. And for the price of a ticket, you could walk up to a window in the trailer and look in on her headless but still living form. Or, in better versions of the illusion, a group of spectators would be brought inside with the girl behind glass, where she'd be put through a few simple tests to show that she was still alive and capable of rudimentary understanding and communication, despite missing, quote, 99% of her brain. Even as a little kid, I knew that it was just a game, but I was fascinated by it. The grim backstory, the implications of these men keeping this profoundly handicapped female body alive, the illusion itself and how it was done, and the ethical questions it all raised. I was 9 years old, and I couldn't get enough of it. Tonight's admittedly hokey tale of Hollywood noir is my little love letter to those bizarre and creepy carnival attractions that, sadly, seem to have vanished. They were rich soil for the imagination of a deeply curious child. You younger folks really missed out. Well, until next time, don't forget me. N'est-ce pas?